Welcome to Learn Commerce PU online classes. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.
Yes. Hello my dear students, welcome to economics online classes. In the previous class we discussed regarding the employment, meaning of worker, who is called worker, and the workers population ratio. Let us look at the self-employment and hired workers. Self-employment, hired workers and categories of employment. So as you know that who are called self-employed. So those people who engage themselves in the work and they want profit and works for the profit. They were called self-employers. So for the purpose of earning money and profit themselves, not for the society benefit or somewhere else, they were working for themselves and earn money or engage in the economic activity are termed as self-employers. Those who engage in that particular activity are termed as self-employed person. So hired workers means those who are also engaged in the work like a self-employers. He is also doing the work or engaged in different kinds of economic activities, but he is hired by the others to do the work. Other will hire him as an employer. Thus, there is a difference between self-employment and hired workers. So, workers who own and operate an enterprise, for example, who own and operate an enterprise to earn livelihood are known as self-employed. Workers who own and operate an enterprise. He himself own and operate his enterprise, his business. He is called as self-employed. He earns money for himself. For doing his work, he is going to get the profit. He is termed as self-employed. Next, who are called casual workers? Self-employers, casual workers and regular salaried people. There are three types of workers we can see. So, self-employers are those who works and who own and operate an enterprise to earn livelihood are termed as self-employers. Engage in their own work and they can fulfill their needs. Then construction workers are termed as casual workers. Casual work laborers or casual workers. Those who engage in the construction of builds, bridges, roads or any kind of construction activities, they comes under casual work laborers. So, most of the cases casual workers are engaged in the construction activities, means most probably they were less educated people. So, less qualified for other activities, but their skill is most involved in the construction activities. They are best in the construction field. Thus, construction workers are termed as casual work laborers. So, daily wages they are going to get, they were also termed as daily wage earners. Daily wage earners. For self-employers, there is no salary for them. So, they themselves engaged in the work and they are going to get the money for them. But, these construction workers hired by the others. So, those who engaged in the work and he is hired by the others to do the work, he is working under someone else. Thus, for that he is going to get the daily wages. So, he is called casual work laborers. Casual work laborers. Casually he is going to do the work and going to get the daily wages or remuneration for his work. Next is third one is regular salaried employees. For example, suppose any one of the either the bank workers, either the teachers or either lawyers or doctors, anyone working under someone, working under someone, not their own this business or operation or institution. Those who works under someone, for working he is going to get the remuneration or salary per month. They were termed as regular salaried employees. Employees who is getting the regular salary or remuneration for their work, they were termed as regular salaried employees. So for that, whatever he is going to do the work, for that he is going to get the regular salary. He is not a self-employer, he is not comes under the casual work laborers or daily wage earners. So there is a payment method, that is regular salaries for their work. Teachers, doctors, lawyers or any workers, drivers or any workers who is working under someone or someone's under the institution or under the bank or post or any of the institution, they were going to get the remuneration or salary per month. They were considered as regular salaried employees. So these are the three kinds of workers we can see. One, we can say the workers who own and operate the enterprise to earn their day-to-day activities or economic activities, or to earn their bread, are known as self-employers. So they engage themselves to earn money. So 52% of people engaged as a self-employers. 52% are self-employed people in India. So within 100, 52% engage themselves and they earn their livelihood. So they are considered as self-employers. So consider to the casual workers or construction laborers, 30% of the people engaged in the construction activities. So they were going to get the daily wages or remuneration for the construction activities. Those construction workers, students, for them, if there is work, then only they are going to get the wages, daily wages. If there is a vacation or if there is no work for that day, particular day, they were not at all going to get any kind of salary like regular salaried persons. If they are going to get the holiday or leave on that particular day, there is no ESI, PF or nothing to the casual work laborers. Just they are going to do the work per particular day, they were going to get the remuneration on that day itself. So there is no job security. No job security. They were not at all going to get the regular salaries. If they are going to vacationally, they were not at all getting the employment. That's what there comes under the vocational unemployed people. Vocational unemployed people, because construction works, now always it is now unable to find the works for the 30% of the population of the India. 30% of people engaged in this construction works. Construction workers going to get the good salary, not salary, good wages, good wages. Salary is different, wages different. ವೇತನ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಬೇರೆ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ರೆಮ್ಯುನರೇಷನ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಡೈಲಿ ವೇಜ್, ಡೈಲಿ ವೇಜಸ್. ಸೊ ಸ್ಯಾಲರಿ is regular salary per month. So wages they are going to get for the daily works. Thus 30% of the people engaged in their construction works, so they have their own skill, knowledge, everything, but whenever the work is there, then only they were going to get the money. Remaining days they have to survive with the whatever the money they earned in the past. That's what poverty increasing in India. So occasionally they were going to get the works. Some other periods, 6 or 4 months, they were as it is, they were don't have any works, idle, and they were not at all earning money. During that time they spend all for the consumption purpose. Thus their contribution to the production is zero, consumption is 100% during the vacation periods. So that's what construction workers are termed as casual work laborers. They are going to get the casual wages per day, not per month, per day. Regular salaried employers. These regular salaried employees, for example, 42% of the people engaged in the regular salaried people, but in urban areas 42% of the people engaged in the regular salaried. For example, working under someone else, either teachers, doctors, lawyers. If they are working under some others, hired by the others. Suppose they are hired by the others. Themselves they are doing the work. For example, teacher is teaching in his own tuition class. He is not comes under the regular salaried employee. He is self-employed. For example, teacher is teaching in one more institution and he is hired by the someone to work as a teacher. Then he comes under the regular salaried employee. Doctor is also, suppose he own his own a doctor shop or his own hospital, he is not at all considered as the regular salaried employee. Suppose he is working to the someone others hospital, then he is considered service given to others, then he is considered as the regular salaried person. Even the lawyer, he is going to maintain his own lawyer office and his own advocate office, then he is not at all comes under regular salaried employee. Suppose he is working for some others, working under someone, then he is considered as comes under regular salaried employees. So through the pie chart we are going to see the urban and rural whatever self-employed and hired workers, urban and rural. How the distribution of employment is done. You can see here urban employees, for example in urban areas, come to the urban areas, you can see here 43% of people engaged self-employment, engaged in self-employment in urban areas. Urban areas 43% of people engaged in self-employment. Self-employment means, already I said, self-employed, those who own and operate his own enterprise or business to lead their life with the intention of getting money himself. He is not at all going to whatever the self-employer is, not at all working under someone or getting salary or remuneration for his work. He works himself and sacrifice himself to earn money. So nearly in urban areas 42% of the people, 42% of the people are comes under regular salaried people, regular salaried people. So regularly they are going to get the salary, means they were working under someone else, MNC companies or any other companies providing the jobs, any institutions, any hospitals or any companies. So those who working under someone, they were going to get the regular salary for that according to their quality and qualification. So then they were considered as regular salaried persons. So in urban areas 42% of the people engaged as a regular salaried persons. Then about 15% of the people, about 15% of the people, they were construction workers. In urban areas only 15% of the people engaged as a construction laborers or casual laborers, casual laborers, casual laborers. So count this, it will comes 100%, 43% plus 42 plus 15%, 3 plus 2 5, 5 5 10, 100%. Now you can see within the 100%, within the 100%, 43% in urban area self-employers, 42% were regular salaried persons and 15% were casual workers or construction laborers. So by this pie chart you came to know how to distribute the workers in the different categories. So while we are presenting this through the chart, it is very easy to understand. So 43% of people self-employers in urban areas, 15% were casual workers and 42% were regular salaried people. Next come to the rural workers population distribution, rural workers population distribution through the pie chart. So see here, 35% of the people in rural areas were regular salaried people. 35% in rural areas are regular salaried persons, RSP, regular salaried people, and 9% of the people were casual labor, CL, we say CL, casual laborers. So 56% of the people were employers because they engage in their own works, either in the farms, they have their own lands, their own economic activities, engage in their own activities. So 100% you can see here, 100% in rural areas, self-employment is more than the casual work or regular salaried persons. But compare it with the urban areas, students. See here, in urban areas, you can compare this with the urban areas. Urban areas, this 43% were self-employers. But in rural area, 56% were self-employers. 56% were self-employed. Self-employment rate is high in rural areas compared to the urban areas. Regular salaried 42%, but regular salaried rural areas compared to the urban areas. Urban areas 42% were regular salaried persons. Casual workers, even the casual workers high in the construction laborers were high in the urban areas rather than rural areas, Thus, while compare this rural area and urban areas, you came to know the workers population distribution in the different categories: self-employment, casual workers and salaried persons. So, now you came to know the clear picture of urban and rural areas workers population distribution. So, properly you can see within the 100%, self-employers 43% in the urban areas, 56% in rural areas. For regular salaried person 42% in urban areas and 35% in rural areas, and casual workers or casual laborers 15% in urban area and only 9% in rural areas. So, by this you came to know, by the chart you came to understand how the workers population ratio distributed among the workers, among the people in India. So, by seeing this you can measure our country's development, how the people engage in the different kinds of economic activities, urban people and rural people. Why the rural people engage more in the self-employment means because they know their own works. Their skill is based on the farming or agriculture and agricultural allied activities in rural areas. India is agrarian country, you know that agriculture is backbone of our country. Most of the people depends on agriculture to their livelihood. So, 56% of the people were self-employed in the rural areas. Compared to the urban areas, self-employment rate is very high in the rural areas and casual workers rate is very low in rural areas. Compared to the regular salaried people, only the 10 or 11% difference you can see. It is 42% and 35% in rural areas and 42% in the urban areas. So, only the slight difference you can see in the regular salaried people both in urban and rural areas, but compared to the self-employment, self-employment rate is very high in the rural area rather than urban area. Casual workers, compared to casual workers, 15% in urban area means it is better than rural areas, only 9% rural areas. Thus, this is just about the workers population distribution, means self-employment and hired workers. Self-employment you came to know those workers who own and operate an enterprise to earn livelihood are known as self-employed. In India, overall 52% people, either urban or rural, together we are considering 52% people engage themselves, they own and operate enterprise to earn livelihood. So, self-employment rate is, overall percentage of people engaged in the self-employment is 52%. Construction workers were 30%. Construction workers were 30% and regular salaried people were, whatever we can say, this regular salaried persons also 40%. 6%. 40% of the people engaged in the regular salaried people. Thus we came to know that workers population ratio in India, it is easy to see through the your pie chart. So by depicting this all the statistical whatever numbers through the pie chart, it is easy to find the distribution of workers population ratio in India. So who comes under the regular salaried, whom comes under the casual workers and self-employed. It is easy to present the data through the this representation, graphical representation, that is through the pie chart. So it is very important for 2 marks. Who are for example, sometimes they may ask the meaning of regular salaried employee, or who are termed as self-employers or casual workers. So this graph never asks pie chart, just for your understanding. So to understand whatever the self-employment rate of employment growth, you should know this pie chart. No need for the examination point of view. Thus for your whatever learning point of view, it is very important. Let us look at the workers population ratio in 2011-12. So as per the sex, women compared to the sex, we are going to see the workers population ratio in urban and rural areas. So as we seen already, we saw the workers population ratio through the pie chart. Let us look at through the table. You can understand very easily what is the workers population ratio in 2011-12. So according to the 2011 census, as per the census, the workers population ratio is shown here. So sex consideration, men and women we are going to consider. So urban workers population ratio is 54.6% men working in urban areas and 54.3% of these men were working in rural areas. While considering to the urban and rural areas, so men's working population is in urban areas 54.6% men's were engaged in work, and in rural areas 54.3% men were working. So according to the 2011-12 report, women's were urban working women's were 14.7% and rural working women's or people engaged in the economic activities or employment is 24.8%. Thus comparing to this, we are going to see the total workers population ratio in 2011-12. So urban total workers population ratio in urban area is 39.9%. According to the recent report, 39.9%. Rural workers population ratio is 35.5%. Earlier I said workers population ratio in rural areas is high rather than urban areas. But at present, after the new economic policy, different methods were used to rise the these employment opportunities. It is because of goals of 5-year plans. As I said, growth is the main aim of the 5-year plan. Self-employment, self-realization, then equity. All this because of men and women were given equal treatment. All this is because of that we achieved the high growth rate of employment and workers engaged in the economic activities. So total workers population ratio, men workers population ratio is 54.4% and total women's workers population ratio is 21.9%. So compare this with the men and women in urban and rural areas. So total working population men and women is 38.6%. Overall we can say total workers population ratio in urban and rural areas together, total men and women engaged in the working is 38.6% only. In urban areas it is 39.9% people were working. In rural areas 35.5% were working. Both together with men and women I am saying. So separately we can say men, working population of men is 54.6 in urban areas, 54.3 in rural areas. As compared to the women, 14.7% in urban areas were engaged in economic activities. What it shows means, still whatever the goals of 5-year plans we can see, or after 1991 many equity policy everything issued, then also participation of women is very less compared to the men in the field of work. That's what it is said to be the GDP growth rate still very low. So rural areas 54.3% men were working and 24.8% women were working. What it shows, in the rural areas, engaging the work in the rural areas is more than the urban areas. Rural women were working more in the urban areas, workforce in the rural areas were more compared to the these urban areas. In urban areas men were working more than the women, but in the rural areas men's population, working population is high, but also comparatively women's also equal to the men. Half of the share is taken by the women in the working conditions. Thus overall total working population in rural area is 35.5% and total urban population is 39.9%. So total overall men and women together working population is 38.6%. 38.6%. It is about the workers population ratio according to the 2011 census, 11-12 report. Let us consider distribution of workers by industries. Distribution of workers by industrial sector, only the industrial sector according to the 2011 census. 2011 and 12 report given by the Statistical Bureau. According to them, distribution of workers by industry 2011-12. Industrial category, as you know that according to the primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector, distribution of workers according to the different categories. So you can see the primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. There are three sectors, sectoral distribution of workers. Sector wise how the work distribution you can see, total percentage is 100. You know that always percentage is calculating by the 100 through the percentile. You studied in the statistics I think. So industrial sector, place of residence rural and urban, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲೋ ಅಥವಾ ರೂರಲ್ ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ, ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಆಫ್ ರೆಸಿಡೆನ್ಸ್, ಸೆಕ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲ್ ಫೀಮೇಲ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಮೆನ್ ವುಮೆನ್ and total distribution of workers by the industry. So you can see the primary sector industry, secondary sector industry and tertiary sector. Primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector, three sectors in the economy. So sectorial distribution of workforce also you can say for this. Thus primary sector, here also place of residence rural and urban we are going to consider. So in primary sector, agricultural sector, you can see agriculture and agriculture related activities, any kind of agriculture related industrial activities. Rural population, 64.1% of rural people engaged in the primary sector activities. Urban people 6.7% were engaged in the primary sector activities. Then compared to the men and women in that particularly primary sector, men is to women is to antede. So 64.1% of the people engaged in the primary sector activity in rural areas, 6.7% of the people engaged in the primary sector activities in urban areas. In that 43.6% were men and 62.8% were women in engaged in the primary sector activities. This total primary sector activities in India is 48.9%. What it shows means compare with the all others. Last I will say you only came to know what is the share of the workers population or work distribution in India. Secondary sector, that is 20.4% people engaged in the rural population, people engaged in the secondary sector activity, industrial sector activity, 35.0% urban people engaged in the industrial sector activity. And what it shows compared to the primary sector to the secondary sector, rural population highly depend on agriculture 64% and less dependent on the industry, and urban people highly dependent on industry and less dependent on agriculture. Easily you can compare. So in that 25.9% were men working in the industrial sector and 20% of the workers working in women's were working in the secondary sector. What it shows, here also you can compare women's in the primary sector 62.8, highest share in the primary sector rather than the secondary sector. Men also highest share in the primary sector rather than the secondary sector. Overall, total engagement of activities in the secondary sector is 24.3% in the secondary sector. Industrial activities ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ? ಓನ್ಲಿ 24%. ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ? 48.9%. What it shows? It shows the highest share of the workforce in the agriculture sector rather than in the industrial sector. Primary sector share is more in India rather than secondary sector. So, contribution to the GDP from the primary sector is more in India rather than secondary sector. So, you should improve the primary sector. Next, tertiary sector. Rural population engaged in the tertiary sector activities 15.5% and urban population engaged in the tertiary sector activities 58.3%. Sex ratio you can see 30.5% of men were engaged in tertiary sector activity. Service sector, tertiary means you know that service providing, transport, communication, education, all are tertiary sector activities, service providing sectors, and 58.3 of the urban people engaged in service sector. Highest share of the service sector activities in the urban population rather than in the rural population. So, the men in the rural areas are men. 30.5% of men were engaged in tertiary sector, 17% of the women were engaged in the tertiary sector. Means service sector is mostly headed by the men rather than the women. Highest share with the men rather than women. Total share of the tertiary sector is 26.8%. Compared to the secondary sector, service sector is heart of economic development. Still it is 26.8% of the distribution of workforce is there in the tertiary sector. Total you know that total 100%, by the 100% we are going to calculate. While comparing all primary sector, secondary sector, service sector, primary sector agriculture, secondary sector industrial sector, tertiary sector is service sector, together called three-tier system of our economy. So, urban rural comparison you can see, and total you can see. By the total you came to know share of GDP in the primary sector is 48.9%, share of GDP is 24.3% because workers engaged in that percent only 24.3%, and the service sector is 26.8%. So, overall you came to know primary sector is the king of our economy. Our agriculture is backbone of our economy, we say no. It is because of that most of the people engaged in the agriculture and agricultural allied activities in India, because our economy is village economy. In village most of the people dependents on the agriculture rather than industry and service sector. By seeing this table, you came to know the clear picture of Indian economy and workers population ratio and distribution of workers by the industry and economy, category wise distribution, primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector. Highest share of workforce in the agriculture rather than in the industry and service sector. First place goes to the primary sector, second place goes to the tertiary sector, and Third place goes to the industrial sector or secondary sector in Indian workforce and GDP. So, it is better to improve the primary sector because most of the people engaged in the primary sector, because Indian economy is village economy. As Gandhiji said, when the village develops, then only our country develops, because most of the people engaged in the agriculture and agricultural related activities. Thank you for watching this video.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.